Welcome to the deep dive. We try to cut through the noise, get right to what matters. And today we're looking at Haiti. Imagine a nation where, well, it's not just struggling, but where criminal gangs have systematically taken apart public services. They control critical infrastructure. They're acting like parallel governments. It sounds like something out of a movie, honestly, but it's daily life for millions there. How does a country even get to this point?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's a situation that, for many listening, might feel really distant, maybe hard to grasp. So this deep dive, we're aiming to take you right into the heart of Haiti's crisis. We've gathered insights from, well, a major report by the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, plus detailed timelines, fact checks, the works.
Yeah, our mission here is to really unpack this tangled web. You know, the incredible reach of the gangs, the political paralysis, the tricky international efforts. By the end, you should have a much clearer picture of what's actually happening on the ground and maybe why it's happening. Okay, so let's start with the scale of this crisis, particularly what's been happening in 2024, maybe spilling into 2025. The numbers. They're pretty shocking. Our sources, they show over 5,600 murders just in 2024. That pushed the homicide rate to almost 48 per 100,000. A national record, sadly.
And it's more than just those awful stats. The human cost is immense. We're looking at a massive humanitarian crisis. Over 1 million people are internally displaced inside Haiti now. Just think about that, 1 million people. That number tripled in just 1 year. It's the biggest displacement UN migration has ever tracked there. These aren't just numbers. They're lives turned upside down.
It's genuinely hard to wrap your head around that level of suffering. And you mentioned gangs controlling maybe 85% of Port-au-Prince plus big chunks of the provinces. What does that actually look like day to day? Are they just there, or are they actively breaking things down?
No, it's much more active than just being there. It's a systematic dismantling of the state, really.
Yeah.
The sources show gangs are deliberately targeting homes, yes, but also hospitals, prisons, police stations. Key infrastructure.
Yeah.
This isn't random violence. It's a strategy. By destroying public services, they basically force people to depend on them for, well, everything. Settling arguments, basic needs. It sort of legitimizes their own parallel authority and kills any trust left in the official government.
That's a really chilling way to think about it. Disruption as a tool for building their own power. And their recruitment, that's alarming too. Especially with children. A 70% increase year on year in kids being forcibly recruited. What does that tell us?
It tells us a couple of things. One is sheer desperation, perhaps, but also it's a deliberate growth strategy for the gangs. They're not just growing their numbers, they're building up serious firepower. We're talking AK-47s, AR-15s, FN-FALs, semi-automatics. The really critical point here is they now often have more firepower than the Haitian National Police. And they've got these consolidated routes for weapons, coming from the U.S., the Dominican Republic, possibly even working with other criminal groups nearby. So more guns, more members. They can overwhelm the police and cement their control. It creates this environment where even kids are just assets to them.
Right. So it's not just random groups causing chaos anymore. It sounds like things have gotten more organized, maybe even unified.
That's exactly right. Something pretty unprecedented happened. This thing called Viv Ansanm. It means living together in Haitian Creole. It's kind of super coalition of gangs. Formed back in February 2024 and coordinated by this figure, Jimmy Chérizier. You might know him as Barbecue.
Okay, Viv Ansanm. How did that alliance, how did it change things for them on the ground?
It was a total game changer for Haiti's criminal landscape. Before this, you had lots of clashes between gangs, right? Viv Ansanm pretty much stopped that internal fighting. So now these groups could pool their resources, their fighters, and focus entirely on expanding their territory, expanding in the capital, expanding out into the provinces. It's a big strategic shift from fighting each other to a kind of coordinated conquest. Makes them way more dangerous.
So it's moved beyond just violence towards actual control. And the sources talk about criminal governance. What does that mean for someone living in an area controlled by these gangs? How are gang leaders acting like judges and advisors?
It means they basically filled a power vacuum. They're the de facto rulers. They settle disputes. They enforce their own rules, their own law and order. And honestly, they hold the power of life and death. We saw horrific examples like the massacres in Artibonite and Wharf Jeremy late in 2024. Hundreds killed. That just shows their absolute terrifying authority. They aren't just criminals anymore. They act like sovereigns, taking resources, imposing their will.
And taking resources. That sounds like a core part of their operation. The sources mention extortion becoming this huge illegal tax system. It affects everything: ports, main roads, border crossings. You basically can't move goods without paying them off.
Exactly. And this shows a really interesting, if disturbing, kind of duality. They're parasites, absolutely, feeding off the system.
Yeah.
But they also need some legal trade to continue, right? So their extortion money keeps flowing. So they become these sort of grim facilitators. This leads to these tense, often violent negotiations with businesses, even parts of the government. Violence becomes a tool, a way to pressure people, force concessions, like they might blockade a port to jack up their extortion fees until they get what they want. It's like a mafia state almost, so entrenched that the country can barely function without their say-so. It's a real politico-criminal deadlock.
Wow. Okay, so given this level of gang control, this sort of criminal government taking hold, you'd think there'd be a strong response, right? Politically, internationally. But the sources paint a really frustrating picture. Haiti's Transitional Presidential Council, the TPC set up April 2024, and the government, they're described as paralyzed by political infighting. What's going on there? How does that infighting stop them from acting?
It's a massive problem, a huge roadblock. This internal fighting, this instability within the TPC and the government, it just cripples any real attempt to build institutions or govern effectively. Forget mounting a unified front against the gangs. We saw it when Prime Minister Gary Conwell was dismissed in November 2024. Plus, you have accusations of corruption aimed at TPC members. That just deepens the dysfunction, the mistrust. It's a vicious cycle, really. The weak institutions let the gangs grow stronger, and the stronger gangs make it even harder to fix the institutions. It just spirals.
And the international help isn't doing much better, is it? The Kenyan-led Multinational Security Support Mission, the MSS, deployed June 2024. Sources say it's been tactically and operationally overwhelmed and basically failed to help the Haitian police so far. Why is it struggling so much?
The challenges are just enormous. First off, money and people. The MSS is severely underfunded. They've gotten something like $97 million, but they estimate they need $600 million a year to actually work. And personnel. They plan for 2,500 officers. Only about 566 have actually shown up. So not enough money, not enough people. And on top of that, there seems to be a real lack of strategic planning, coordination between the MSS and Haiti's own police. It makes them pretty ineffective against this scale of crime, like trying to put out a forest fire with a bucket chain.
Not enough people, not enough money, no clear plan. Yeah, sounds dire. What about that idea to make it a full UN peacekeeping operation? Did that go anywhere?
Yeah, that was discussed. Haiti supported it. The U.S. supported it. It came up at the UN Security Council in November 2024. But ultimately, China and Russia rejected it. They abstained from the vote. So that means Haiti is stuck with the current mission, the under-resourced MSS, as the main outside security help, even as things get worse. It really shows how hard it is to get international agreement on tackling these complex crises.
Right. And beyond the security and the politics, there's this other really nasty element. Misinformation. We really need to talk about those horrible, baseless stories about cannibalism in Haiti that were flying around.
Yeah, it's incredibly damaging stuff. It got spread really widely on social media, picked up by some big names, sensationalist media, often using these graphic, totally misleading images to stir up fear and push this, frankly, racist narrative about Haitians and what's happening there.
But the facts, according to the U.S. State Department, according to experts who actually know Haiti, they're totally different. They've been very clear. Zero credible reports of cannibalism, not among gangs, not in the general population. It's just not true.
Exactly. And the videos used as proof. They've been debunked again and again. They're old videos or from completely different countries. I think somewhere like Halloween things in China or an old interview with a Hindu sect in India or just totally unverified stuff.
Yeah.
It's a deliberate distortion, trying to make the situation seem even more barbaric than it already is for whatever agenda.
Even the nickname of that gang leader, Jimmy Chérizier, barbecue, that gets twisted into this narrative. But he explained it himself back in 2019. It came from his mom, who sold fried chicken on the street. Nothing to do with cannibalism. Why does this kind of stuff stick, especially about Haiti?
Well, it's disturbing, but these claims, they tap into a really long and deep history of trying to dehumanize Haiti. Historians trace it back centuries, even to Columbus misinterpreting things. Later, colonial powers, white supremacists used these kinds of stories to justify exploitation, to discredit black independence after the Haitian Revolution, and even during the U.S. occupation in the early 20th century. It's a racist trope, plain and simple. And today it reinforces harmful stereotypes. And, crucially, it distracts from the real complex issues. It makes it harder to see the actual human suffering and the systemic problems driving the crisis.
Yeah, it really shows you need to be critical about what you see and read. Okay, let's shift, though. How can Haiti move forward from this, if that's even possible right now? We're seeing vigilante groups pop up. They offer some protection, maybe, but they're outside the law. What are the risks there, this blurring of lines?
Well, the big risk is normalizing violence outside of any legal structure, extrajudicial violence. There have been really concerning reports of abuses, even against medical staff from MSF, Doctors Without Borders, and not just by vigilantes, but sometimes reportedly by police, too. The government police have even talked up this idea of a police-population marriage, basically encouraging citizens to take justice into their own hands. That's a really dangerous path. It blurs who's responsible. It encourages mob justice, more killings. It just leads to more fragmentation and conflict down the line.
And underneath all this, it seems, is this problem of systemic impunity. The justice system is weak. The UN panel of experts, they've laid out links between gangs and powerful people in politics and business, but not much seems to happen. Why is it so hard to hold people accountable?
It is incredibly hard. There have been international sanctions, U.S., Canada, Dominican Republic, targeting some powerful Haitians. But within Haiti, actual investigations, arrests, they're slow or they just don't happen. The capacity and maybe the political will to go after these connected figures just isn't there. That said, there are some signs of action, maybe externally driven. Like in August 2025, Jimmy Chérizier and a U.S. citizen, Bazile Richardson, were indicted in the U.S. for violating sanctions for financing gangs. The U.S. even put a $5 million reward out for Chérizier. So there's some effort to hit the financial network supporting the gangs, even if Haiti's own justice system struggles.
So looking ahead, what's the way out? The sources seem to stress shifting away from just security. They talk about needing a mixed justice, development aid, humanitarian work. What would a response like that actually involve?
It's a huge task, no doubt, but it's seen as essential. First, you need a much deeper understanding of the political economy of the violence. Like, how do these gangs really work? Who funds them? Who benefits from the chaos? And then use that intel for targeted action, legal action. Yes, supporting the Haitian police and the MSS mission is vital, but it needs a total rethink of the security strategy, not just more numbers. And crucially, reopening dialogue, serious dialogue between Haitian groups and international partners. Relaunching the political transition, but with real teeth, mediation, accountability. And a big one, a comprehensive justice strategy that actively works to break these deals, these impunity pacts between gangs and elites.
Right. So enforcing sanctions properly, bringing organized crime experts into missions, better programs for disarmament, demobilization, reintegration, especially for kids forced into gangs, and addressing the horrific sexual violence, too. It's incredibly complex. But it sounds like there are potential steps.
There are. The challenge is immense, maybe unique globally in some ways, but it's not necessarily impossible if these integrated approaches are actually tried seriously and together. The tools exist. The challenge is implementing them effectively.
So as you've heard today, Haiti's crisis, it's so much more than just gang violence. It's this deep knot of politics, crime, economics, where these groups are basically woven into the fabric of the country's governance. We've seen how internal politics are stuck, how international help is struggling, and how all of this gets clouded by this long history of damaging misinformation.
Exactly. It's a powerful illustration of how security, politics, the economy, and just basic human well-being are all completely tied together. You can't fix one without addressing the others.
So here's something to think about. If criminal groups can embed themselves so deeply into a nation's essential functions, its politics, like we see in Haiti, what does that actually mean for our whole idea of national sovereignty today? And how can you even begin to build a stable, functioning state in that kind of environment long term? Definitely something to mull over.